Welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. Are you ready to be challenged? It's interesting for us to learn the Parsha, to learn the story of Jewish history as some sort of an ancient narrative of some people that were groping in the spiritual darkness, wandering in the spiritual desert. But when you learn the Parsha as a personal story of our own struggles, it becomes a lot more personal of a narrative than just reading it as history. You know that in Hebrew there is no word for history. There is no such word in Hebrew as history. No such word. Why? Because they don't believe in history as some sort of a detached armchair reading. Hey Terry, long time no see. But the word is my story. The word is my story. It's only relevant to now. If the stories of the past are not relevant to today, then we're not interested in them. You know how many details are left out of the Torah? How many details of the past 5,785 years are not included in the Torah? Because they're not relevant. Only those that are actually relevant. Only those that are actually relevant are the ones that are included in the Torah. Relevant to what? Relevant to today. Today's Torah study is sponsored by Corey Nadell in memory of her father Bernard on the occasion of his yahrzeit and in loving memory of her son Michael today on his birthday. Her father is Bunim ben Tzvi Yehuda. May this serve to elevate his soul and Michael's soul in Gan Eden in the merit of our mitzvah. So, thank you, Corey. The challenge I'd like to present you with today is the Jewish people are in the desert. Sorry, they're in Egypt. The Jewish people are finally in Egypt. They made it down. Joseph invited them down to Egypt. And now Joseph and the Jewish people, Jacob has passed away. Sorry, the tribes of Israel have passed away. And now a new Pharaoh arises. This is the beginning of today's Torah portion on page 321 in the Chumash. A new Pharaoh arises and he's intimidated by the Jews. So what does he do? His astrologers tell him that, well, first of all, what they do is like this. There's two ways to read the slavery of the Jewish people in Egypt. One is a backward story of slavery. Another one is a modern story of deep, profound relevance. Let's take a quick look at the story and how we read it. Page 321, right? The Jews are now in Egypt. Middle of the page, verse number 8. At this time, a new king who did not know Joseph arose over Egypt. According to one opinion, this is in fact a new Pharaoh. Others say that this was the same Pharaoh, but that he acted as if he had never heard of Joseph. You may want to use the same book as us if you want the same page numbers. He said to his people, look, the people, the Israelites, are becoming more numerous and stronger than us. Is intimidated by the minority. The minority is strengthening. Let us deal cleverly with them and their God who is clearly involved in their natural fertility, lest they increase in the event of war, they will join our enemies, fight us, and go up out of the land. Or even worse, take over the country and force us to go up out of the land. So what do? They appointed draft officers over them in order to afflict them with the chores that they imposed on them. And thus the Jews built up the existing cities of Pitom and Ramses and making them fit to serve as storage cities for Pharaoh. So what do? They appointed officers over them. And somehow they inspired them to start building or enslaved them to start building storage cities. I mean, how did this happen? How did this even happen? That suddenly, overnight, bam, the Jews began to build storage cities. When you read the regular verse, they're like, how does that even happen? Are you able to enslave a minority like that? Could that happen in America?
Are they a minority? It said they grew more than they were.
Nah, this is happening in the Egyptian Senate. They were worried. These guys are having high fertility rates. What happens if they keep it up and they take over us? A demographic time bomb. Eventually, they're projecting the future. These are the actuarial scientists that were giving Pharaoh's advice. They were telling him, if you keep it up and you let them continue with their fertility rates, they might overwhelm us eventually one day in the future. But suddenly, how does this happen? But the more the Egyptians afflicted them, the more God blessed the Israelites. This is a very beautiful verse, by the way. I often speak about the purpose of pain. And this verse encapsulates it. The purpose of pain is for a greater good. And the verse says, the more the Egyptians afflicted them, the more God blessed the Israelites, so they increased and spread. And the Egyptians were both disgusted and vexed over the increase of the Israelites. The first phase of conscripted labor lasted about 30 years, from some time after the year 2332 until 2362. 2332 from creation of the world, right? Seeing that this degree of slavery did not curb the Israelites' proliferation, the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites with back-breaking, i.e. demoralizing and unusual labor. They embittered their lives with hard labor, making them work with mortar and bricks, as well as all kinds of work in the field. All the work they subjected them to was imposed with crushing harshness. The king of Egypt then spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was Amram's wife. Amram was the Rebbe, the leader of the Jewish people. Then he was the son of Kahat, who was the son of Levi, who was the son of Jacob. So he was the heir apparent of the priestly line. So Amram's wife Yocheved was called. So one was called. One was Shifra and the other was called Pua. Right. So Yocheved's other name was Shifra, right? And the other was the 5 or 6 year old daughter, Miriam, was called Pua. So this is Moses' sister and mother. Okay. They were the Hebrew midwives. What does Pharaoh say to them when he summons the Hebrew midwives? When you deliver the Hebrew woman, look at the birth stool. You know the word birth stool in Hebrew is? Crisis. Same word as crisis. I often speak about this idea. Mashber. M-A-S-H-B-E-R. Mashber is the Hebrew word for birth stool. You see it here in Rashi. And that means that the word for crisis, in English, a crisis is a bad thing. But in Hebrew, the word for crisis is a birthing stool, because what looks like a bad thing, in some weird, mysterious way, ultimately leads to far greater good, like the birthing stool, which could be viewed as a place of pain, or it could be viewed as a place of life. Just an interesting side note. If it is a boy, said Pharaoh, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. Right? This is the story. Now, there's a lot of questions I'm going to ask you. Like what if Pharaoh says to the midwives, kill him, kill the boys? Okay, got it. Does he have to tell them to let the girls live? Like, is that not obvious? If he told them to kill the boys, then what are you supposed to do with the girls? Like, don't kill them. Okay. Does the Torah have to say the boys you should kill, the girls you should not kill? I mean, obviously, the Torah doesn't have any redundancies. So if it says that the girls you should kill, then the girls you should kill. Sorry, the boys you should kill the boys. Why doesn't he say, but the girls, them you should let live? Isn't that obvious? The Torah could have stated nothing, and we would have known exactly the same conclusion, right? Right. So, lots of questions here, but the midwives feared God and they did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. On the contrary, they provided the newborns with food and water, and this helped the boys live. The king of Egypt summoned the midwives and demanded them, why have you done this and kept the boys alive? The midwives answered, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are skilled in giving birth. They're like animals who don't need midwives. Even if we try a system, it wouldn't work, because before the midwife even gets to them, they're already giving birth. They give birth like animals. They just do it all by themselves, right? And God rewarded the midwives. Okay, now I got a lot of questions here. So how does this story even make sense? What's going on? How did the Jewish people become enslaved in Egypt? How does this process even happen? How do you become slaves in a society where you, just because you're in a minority, that suddenly they're building cities and then they're doing backbreaking labor? How does it, and why is it that Pharaoh, by the way, why does he want to kill the kids? Rashi tells us the astrologers told Pharaoh that the Redeemer of Israel is soon to be born. The one that's going to take them out of this now slavery. So Pharaoh's like, okay, well, what's his Achilles heel? How do we take him out? So the astrologers correctly foresaw that Moses was going to have his downfall with water. How was Moses denied access to the promised land, remember? Ultimately, when he hit the rock, when the water came out of the rock, right? So they correctly foresaw that his Achilles heel was water. So they said, you got to drown him. You got to drown him, right? Fine. So Pharaoh says, okay, let's throw all the boys into the river Nile. The water can overwhelm him. That's his Achilles heel. And the girls we don't care about. Fine. But still, we don't understand why it has to say the girls you should let live. One more thing is, so then at one point, Rashi points out that the astrologers said to Pharaoh that we're not sure if the Redeemer of Israel is a Jew or a Gentile. And they correctly foresaw this. Because remember, where was Moses actually raised? He was raised in the Pharaoh's house and he was in charge of Pharaoh's house. So they were like a little confused. They were like, we're not sure. At one point, Rashi points out they even had the Egyptian boys thrown into the river Nile. But when we read the story, and we do read the story every year at the Passover Seder, we have to understand what, pray tell, is going on over here. How did the Jews become enslaved? What was the significance of this drowning of the boys on a spiritual level, and the survival of the girls? What is this supposed to mean?
Can you go back one step?
Yes.
It seems to me that Joseph needed a good lawyer.
Joseph needed a good lawyer. Okay, he should have had like some sort of
a succession plan.
Oh, a succession plan.
Well, I mean, Joseph is so brilliant. He's so smart. He knows he's going to die one day. He knows his brothers are going to die. How does he not put a succession plan into place?
How does Joseph not put in a succession plan into place? What an interesting question.
That's why I asked it.
That's why he asked it. Bear in mind, Rob, bear in mind that Joseph, to support your question, Joseph was clearly a brilliant planner. Brilliant. He planned 7 years of plenty, and he foresaw the 7 years of scarcity throughout the 7 years of plenty. So clearly Joseph was a planner, which, by the way, is what's so surprising to me about so many of my fellow Jews here in Palm Beach Gardens. I said to them, guys, you know every single step of your life. Every time you go on a vacation, you know how to pack, you know how to plan, you know what excursions you're going to be taking. Whenever you know, you're planning ahead your financial plan for how much money you're going to be making when you're 86, when you're 96, when you're 106. You know how much money you're going to be making. You got all your printouts, you got all the things. But what happens when you leave this world? I say to them, what happens when you leave this world? Rabbi, I have no clue. I'm like, have you ever done anything in your life where having no clue where you're going? Wherever they take me, they take me. What are you talking about? You see, I have the same question. I have the same question. What do you mean you're not planning? Well, you're just planning for like whatever happens, whichever way the wind is blowing, that's what's going to happen. Maybe I'll be deleted into a memory on the wall, or maybe I'll have eternal life. I don't know. I'm like, don't you want to hedge your bets a little bit? Don't you want to, like, maybe just in case, you know, there actually is something on the other side, don't you want to, like, invest in that? Isn't that why you have life insurance? In case, I'm talking about term life insurance, in case something bad happens, something that you don't want, you still want to be prepared. So wouldn't you want to have term life insurance for eternal life? You know, I should become an insurance salesman, actually.
That's Pascal's wager.
Tell me, what's Pascal's wager?
He was a philosopher.
I know he's a philosopher, French philosopher, yeah.
Right. And he said that there are 4 things that can happen. You know, if you believe in God and there is a God, then it works out well for you.
4 things that can happen. If there is a God and you believe in God, great. Okay, next.
If you believe in God and there is no God, well,
if you believe in God and there is no God, no loss. Okay, fine.
Right.
Fine, no bad.
And the same with if you don't believe
But if you don't believe in God and there is a God, now you're in trouble.
Now you're in trouble.
And if you don't believe in God and there's no God, no problem. Right? But 2 out of 4, that's a 50%. 75%.
75, right.
75. No, 30-50%. Because the second one was if you believe in God and there is no God, then you don't have to worry about it. It's only 50%. I know, but you've lived a good life. You've lived a life of conscience. Yeah, but the atheists will say you waste your time.
That the wager that you should
50% is a high stake. If you knew that you had a 50% chance of winning the $1 billion lottery, would you buy a ticket? I think so. 50% is very high. Right? If you knew you had 50% chance of dying today, if you got out of bed, you probably would not get out of bed. Right? So, and Mark, how do you plan for that unknown? Simple. Like we just said. I mean, you just make you make the wager. You go either this or that, and I'm going to plan for both options. That's how you plan for the unknown. But now, if I understand your question correctly, Mark, if you're asking, how do you plan for the unknown as in something which you know nothing about, then you learn about it. That's how you do it. You go to jewishgardens.com/wisdom center. jewishgardens.com/wisdom center. And you look up the course, the seminar called Journey of the Soul. It's a 6-part seminar, which you, Mark, learned with me. Journey of the Soul. It's a 6-part seminar, which you learn online, jewishgardens.com/wisdom center. And you learn a lot about where we go from here. That's how you do it. And then you ask a lot of questions. Good. Back to the story, folks. So I want to say that I have the same question as you have on Joseph, I have on my fellow Jews. Now, that still doesn't answer the question. So once I validated your question, I want to say this. Perhaps Joseph understood that there was a vast eternal plan. Remember, God had told Abraham, his great-grandfather, that the Jews were going to be slaves in a foreign land for 400 years. So maybe Joseph kind of planned to bring them into Egypt and then let destiny take its place. That's the only answer I could possibly give it, because you're right. You got a very good point.
I mean, it's so powerful. Pharaoh basically says, you're in charge of everything.
Yeah, I mean, he could have made these executive decisions.
And he could have put people in positions of power.
He could have made, power of attorney documents and stuff like that, right? Let's go back to the story, guys. I want to hit the story. Because it could be, by the way, it's a good point. It's a good answer that Keith is saying. Because if you read closely the verse over here, it says on 321 here, it said that, 321, it says, a new king who did not know Joseph rose over Egypt. So Rashi explains either it was a new king who rejected Joseph's rulings, or it was the same Pharaoh, but he made as if he didn't know Joseph. In other words, the new Pharaoh who had dictatorship powers overrode anything that Joseph put into place. Maybe that's your answer. Anyways, back to the story here, folks. Let's go back to our story. What, pray tell, is going on in Egypt? I'm about to challenge you. Because we look at the Jews like, would you have agreed to fall into slavery like that? If you were in Egypt, would you have agreed? Well, I'm going to challenge you right now. Because what happened was, according to the way that I would like to interpret the story based on the Rebbe's teachings, things like this. What happened is that the Jews were living in a free country in Egypt. And then one day, this is what the Medrash says, Pharaoh comes out and he says, let us build Egypt into a great nation. And the Jewish minority says, this is our chance to be accepted amongst the culture of the modern society here. We're going to be at the forefront of the initiatives, of the economic and prosperity development initiatives of this country. And Pharaoh himself was out there. He was holding like a little brick thing. You know how to make bricks? I don't know how to make bricks, but he had a thing for making bricks. And he was holding a brick thing. So they were holding a brick thing. So everybody was holding a brick thing. And everybody was building with great enthusiasm for nationalistic purposes. And then after a few days, everybody's so excited and inspired. Pharaoh's like, you know what? Today, I'm going to leave a little early. Tomorrow, I'm going to come a little late. The next day, I'm not even going to come at all. But by now, they had already become enslaved into the mentality. Was it? Now, one way to read it in the Haggadah pictures, in the pictures of the Haggadah, you see them coming out with whips. But could it be that they weren't coming out with whips as much as they were coming out with an ideology from which they could not break themselves free? Because they were so committed to the rebuilding of America that they could not break themselves free when their rabbi got up and he said, you are slaves to a foreign culture. And they were like, what is he smoking? What is that rabbi talking about? We are Democrats. We are beloved by our fellow Democrats. Look how many Democrats love us. And so said the Republicans. Both of them. I'm talking about both of them. We have friends. Rob, exactly. MAGA, make Egypt great again. Exactly. MAGA. Well said. It's even better than MAGA, right? Sounds good, right? Think about this, folks. Think about this, folks. Think about this, folks. They said, I was invited to the inauguration on January 20th. Do you know what that means? Not me. The guy said. I was invited to the inauguration of the new Pharaoh. How bad could this be? We are beloved by the Egyptians. I will even have a seat. You know, my friend has a seat on the dais. We are more Egyptians than we are Hebrews. And this is the enslavement with which Pharaoh was talking about. And it gets worse, by the way. It gets worse. So now they were steeped in Egyptian culture and they didn't even know it. You know how you cook a frog? Have you ever cooked? Yeah. You know how to cook a frog. You know how you cook a frog? You know how to cook a frog. No, I've never tried this, but it makes sense. Frogs. Exactly. You cook it slowly. You never put a frog. Now, I never tried this. Don't try it at home. But I've read about this. I've read about this. Well, no. How could it be a Baba Meister? Mike, I challenge you because the French cook frogs. Okay? Okay, whatever. How do you know? Okay, one second. I want to challenge you because Mike, I want to challenge you because I know that you got a PhD and you're a doctor. Very nice. But you cannot, by definition, prove a negative. So you cannot tell me that it's not true. You cannot prove a negative. It's impossible to prove a negative. So I challenge your challenge. Enough said. Okay. Being tested? Okay, fine. Hot water, cold water. If you put a frog in cold water, okay, and then you put a little low fire under it and you heat it up slowly, what's going to happen?
They jump out anyway.
How about if you cover the top? How about you cover the top? Okay, forget it. We got a heckler, guys. We got a heckler here today. Anyways, I'm going to go with my thing here. If you put the frog in cold water and you heat it up slowly, then the frog won't realize, assuming the frog won't jump out, because this is what the PhD here says, but assuming that the frog won't jump out, because assuming the frog got food at the bottom there, okay, let's say he got plenty of food. Keep him busy. Exactly. Keep him busy, right? This is my frog, right? Now, keep him busy and the water heats up slowly. He gets comfortable. He likes it and it doesn't bother him. By the time it gets the boiling point, he doesn't realize because it increased too slowly. And by the way, I just want to tell you, this is exactly how the evil inclination treats us. This is exactly how the evil inclination challenges us as Jews. What does the evil inclination do? To hold that second question a second. The evil inclination, what he doesn't come to you and say, Harvey, I want you to worship idols. He doesn't do that. He inches in ever so slowly. He says, Harvey, very nice he came to Minyan today. I'm very proud of you. And then you're like, oh, this guy's a good Jew. And the next day he says, you know, Harvey, you can go to Minyan, but go a little late, leave a little early. The third day he says, you know what? They already have a Minyan. You're a good Jew already. It's fine. The fourth day, he says, you know what? Maybe you should go to church with I don't know who, right? You see what I'm saying? He wins your trust over ever so slowly. And that's exactly how the evil inclination does it. And that's exactly what happened to the Jewish people in Egypt. Here they started off and they didn't just jump into slavery in a second. It wasn't a back-breaking, whipping slavery as much as it was an American slavery, where they were slaves to the economical and to the economy and to the contemporary wisdom and to the way of living that we absolutely have no choice but to live and to conform to, because to think that I would do something other than the regular trajectory of what all Americans do is unthinkable. That is a state of Egyptian slavery. What were you about to say?
I was going to say, so you're saying it's more of a seduction.
It's a seduction process, exactly right. As opposed to an incineration, it's a seduction process where you get warmed up, and by the time you're finished, you don't even realize how you ever even got there in the first place. Now, I want to take it one step further. I want to make this very challenging, very personal, because Pharaoh says, throw the boys into the river Nile, and the girls, let them live. You know what it means to let the girls live? It's bad to throw the boys in the river Nile, but it's even worse, says the Rebbe, to let the girls live. Pharaoh wasn't just saying, let them live, like leave them be, lascia stare. He wasn't saying that. What Pharaoh was saying is, you raise them within your culture, to the Egyptians. He says, let them live according to our standards. Send them to Egyptian public schools and make sure that they are raised in an Egyptian mindset, an Egyptian way of thinking. Don't just leave them be. No. Raise them according to our culture. So it's one thing for the boys to get killed. They would die physically. But for the girls to be allowed to live is for the girls to die spiritually. And this is the back-breaking slavery that's happening in Egypt right now. What's going on is that the boys are being killed physically and the girls are being killed spiritually, because they're steeped in a mindset and a mentality from which they cannot break themselves free, just like my brothers and sisters here in Palm Beach Gardens. American Jewry that look at me like I'm out of my mind when I tell them that they need to take off Shabbos 25 hours. They're like, they don't even know what I'm talking about. They're like, how is that even possible to turn off my email for 25 hours? You mean I shouldn't watch the news for 25? They don't even understand how it's possible. Don't answer my phone? How could I do that? And I'm like, hello, you're a Jew. You're a free person. You can do whatever you want. You happen to be living in America, yeah. But America welcomes diversity. America is not a melting pot. It's a chopped salad, right? Nobody wants you to melt. They want you to be who you are. Don't disintegrate. Make America great through your uniqueness. Shine your light. Don't dissolve your light. And then the Rebbe takes it one step further. The Rebbe says, you know what it means to throw them in the river Nile? Ouch. The river Nile. What's the river Nile? You know what the river Nile was? The river Nile was the idolatry of Egypt. You know that it doesn't rain in Egypt. Where does Egypt get irrigated from? The swelling of the banks of the river Nile every September. I think they have something called a shaduf. A shaduf was like this water carrying system that helped the water go from one place to another place. It's like a simple kind of lever system. This is how Egypt gets irrigated. When the god, lowercase g, of prosperity would irrigate their fields every September. This is the god which they would pray to. You know, the Egyptians are pagans. They prayed a lot of gods. The sun god, the weather god, the rain god, no rain god, okay? The cattle was their god because cattle represented wealth. But the river Nile was the master god. Even Pharaoh they worshipped as a god, right? The river Nile was the master god because this is the main artery of Egyptian life. If you look at Egyptian civilization, it's all along the river Nile. That's where it is. That's where they live. Because they can't live in the Sahara Desert. And here's what happens when Pharaoh says drown them in the Nile. The Rebbe explains it doesn't necessarily mean that they were suffocated to death under the water. There's a deeper meaning here. The deeper meaning is that Pharaoh said, drown them in the pressures of making a living. Drown them in the pressures. Give them crushing responsibilities so that they will be spiritually suffocated, unable to breathe, unless they experience the God of economical prosperity, which in America today is what? College campus. You couldn't possibly think of raising a child or a grandchild without sending them to college. Oh, the horror. How could I not send my grandchild to college? This is child abuse. To not send your child to the most corrupt intellectual institutions in the history of the world. No. We must send our children to places that endanger the lives of my own children. This is where we have to send them. This is idolatry. It's an irrational addiction, which makes no sense. Would you let your child play in the middle of the road where they might get run over? Of course not. Why would you send your child to a college campus where their lives are in peril? Why would you do such a thing? If not that it's idolatry. If not that it's an irrational addiction that makes no sense. It's an enslavement of the Jewish people in Egypt. So today I say to you this. Instead of reading the story of the Egyptian slavery as an ancient story of a backward people that had no flipping clue what they were getting themselves into. No. I challenge you today. I challenge you to read the story of the Egyptian slavery, not as their story, but as my story, as your story. What are you a slave to today? Are you a slave to the economy? You know, there's a guy here who came to me after one of the recent elections, and he was crying his eyes out about how the other candidate won the election. And I said to him, you're an idolater. What do you want? What are you doing? You believe in a mortal human being that's going to control your destiny? What a Biden and Obama, a Trump is going to actually change your destiny? I mean, this is insane. Look at this. Look at what's going on over here. Trump came in and he was going to tell us that he was going to be, all hell was going to break loose, right? All hell was going to break loose in Gaza if the hostages weren't released, right? Apparently, all hell that he was referring to was the hell was going to break on Israel because Bibi buckled, or is, God forbid, buckling on some sort of a bad hostage deal, releasing the future October 7th terrorists. God forbid. They're releasing them from prison for what? For a bunch of people that you don't even know if they're alive or dead? You can't even give us an answer like that? They're making a mockery of the Trump presidency. And I hope and pray that Trump stays strong. And I hope and pray that the conjecture and the public positions on what the president is doing, the future president is doing, is incorrect. Is incorrect because you cannot ever trust an immortal human being. That's idolatry. There's only one place that you can trust, and that's in God Almighty. Biden shouldn't break your heart or make your heart, neither should Trump. We only trust in God Almighty. That's it, because everything else is idolatry. And if you're going to come and tell me, my kid is going to college, I just sent $1 million to the great institution of Columbia University, right? And now they're going to stage all the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, pro-genocide conferences, right? From the river to the sea. What's the river to the sea? From the river to the sea means no Israel. It's not a two-state solution. When they say river to the sea, they mean Israel should be wiped off the map. All Jews in Israel should be killed. That is the definition of genocide. And that's going to happen at the Goldberg Auditorium, which you, the fool, just gave $1 million or $10 million in order to name after your beloved grandfather, right? And they're making a mockery of you because you're a slave. Because you're a slave to the Egyptian Nile, to the Egyptian economical artery, to the source of prosperity in Egypt. Yes, it's a story of, I like how you say that, Rose, institutions of higher indoctrination. Yes, well said.
Even the dollar says we can gather.
Yes, even the dollar says, go back to the founding fathers. In God we trust. Everyone else pays cash. So when we come back to this, we say college. We look at college and we're like, look, money doesn't come from college. Success doesn't come from Stanford or Ivy League or something like that. Money comes from God. And that's what the monotheist believes. Money comes from God. Maybe it comes through college, but it could come through other stuff as well. Maybe you get hired because you have a nice resume. But you know what? If Hashem wants, you're going to get it. Now, I know you think I'm absolutely crazy. You think, oh my God, sending your kid to yeshiva? Sending your kid to yeshiva? How could you possibly do it? You wouldn't really like not send it to college, Rabbi, would you? And I'm like, no, I would. I would actually keep him in yeshiva, not send them to college, because college is dangerous. And college is not only dangerous for their bodies, it's also dangerous for their souls. So the other way around, it's not only dangerous for their souls, it's now even dangerous for their bodies, right? We used to wonder if our kids were good enough for college campus. And today we wonder if the college campus is good enough for our kids. But friends, yeah, they can't even define a woman, says Kenneth. Yeah, you're right. Well stuff. Good. So the bottom line is, friends, I challenge you today. And with this, I leave you today. I challenge you to reflect on whether you are today a slave in Egypt. Just replace the word Egypt with America. That's it. That's all you need to do. Are you an American slave or not? So 2,000 years from now, they'll be reading about the story of the American slavery and ultimately that there was a prophet that led the Jews to freedom. And you know how many Jews came out of Egypt? Do you know how many Jews came out of Egypt?
3 million. 2 million.
Only 20%. Only 20% of the Jews in Egypt were actually believing that there was going to be a redemption. The other 80% did not want to go. Why did they not want to go? Because they didn't believe that they were enslaved. You know, Mor Klein told us the other night that the miracle of Purim, he quoted Rabbi Soloveitchik saying, the miracle of Purim, such a great line. The miracle of Purim what was the miracle of Purim? It's hard to identify the miracle of the Purim story, by the way. There's no blatant miracle. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says like this. He says that the miracle of Purim was that it was the only time in Jewish history where someone threatened the genocide against the Jewish people, and they actually believed him. Because every other time that there was a genocide threatened against us, and there were many, we were like, oh, they don't mean bad. They're just saying it. They don't mean it. It's just in order to pander to their base. They don't really want to kill the Jews. October 7th, you can't believe everything you see. You can only believe half of what you hear. This is crazy. 80% of the Jews in Egypt did not want to get free, and they died in Egypt. They stayed there. They were trapped to the point that they died inside of their exile. They drowned in their Egyptian River Nile. They were the frog, exactly. And the miracle is that 20% had the sense to be able to jump out to break free. Friends, if you're sitting around this table, if you're watching this YouTube, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, whatever we're on right now, then I want you to say this to yourself. Then you're one of those 20%. You're one of the 20%. And the question is what I'm saying to you going to go like right over your head, or is it going to actually go in and you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to read the Passover story differently this year? Because I want to challenge you, when you sit at the Passover Seder this year with your kids, what are you going to talk about? Is it going to be a boring lip service like, Dad, can we get over with this and get to the brisket yet? Or is it going to be such a fascinating conversation with your children and grandchildren that they're going to say, we're not interested in the brisket. This is so awesome. I've never had a Seder like this before. Friends, this is what you got to do. You got to watch this video again. Share with your children and grandchildren. Take one of your grandchildren, say to her or him, say, I want you, please, to make talking points for our Seder. Make a game from this video. Ask questions. What are you enslaved to? What's the River Nile in your life? What is it that you would not believe even if the truth slapped you in the face? What a great question is that. If the truth slapped you in the face and you were, what is it? What conviction are you so enslaved to that you would never even be able to recognize what just happened to you? Right? Friends, we got to read the Passover story this year a whole different way. Okay? We've got to read the story a whole different way. It's not their story. It's our story. It's not Egypt. It's America. It's not the River Nile. It's college campuses. It's conventional thinking. It's current wisdom. It's prejudice and preconceived notions. And we are free people. We are free people. You know, I love how people say to me, Rabbi, you're a rabbi? No, I'm a free thinker. I'm a free thinker. I don't, because you guys all dress the same. You guys all dress the same, all the religious people. So I look at them and I'm like, you're a free thinker, really? Go to any college campus and see what every single person is wearing, the same exact thing. The same sneakers, the same blue jeans, and the same white, whatever clothing that they wear over there. Right? They listen to the same music. They got exactly the same iPod, Apple, something product, and they got exactly the same stuff. And you're telling me that we're the ones that are lemmings? Oh, no. I think that you're enslaved to the point that you cannot even smell the coffee. Wendy says she's freed. That's cool. I love that. Hot Cake says she's one of the 20%. I love it. And Thomas says, nope, men cannot save us. Good. Yes, I'm sorry.
I want to
have you ever wondered why students in the U.S. are so pro-Islam and anti-American, anti-Israel? Gifts for American university from foreign countries. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to challenge you on the count.
You're on campus. You're on
Number one, if you don't send your kids, if Jews don't send their kids to college, where are the Jewish doctors, lawyers, accountants, scientists, physics,
Okay, so Rob is telling me a question. He says, okay, fine. So let's say, Rabbi, you're right. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're onto something. Then where are we going to get Jewish doctors, lawyers, accountants from?
And scientists. Number two is rather than being an isolationist, we ought to send our kids to Jewish college. We ought to send our Jewish kids to colleges, and rather than have them be lemmings, have them speak up, speak out, correct the record, challenge their professors, not.
Guess what happens? You send your kids to college and they come out brainwashed. That happens all the time.
Well, that's our problem.
Yeah.
That's not the college's problem.
It actually is the college.
Send them as
Colleges aren't accepting the Jewish kids anymore.
Exactly. They don't even want us anymore. They're not even accepting us because they're so anti-Israel. Because you're a Zionist and you're an IDF.
Especially where I live,
In Toronto.
there are the medical school classes 0. And we're talking, it used to be 20.
Rob, I just want to answer your question. I want to sign off of you. I want to just say like this. First of all, you don't need the River Nile in order to get a profession. You got to get comfortable with that idea that you don't need the River Nile in order to be able to feed your family.
I'm talking about being a scientist.
Forget the science. I'm breaking your question into 2 parts, okay? I'm breaking your question. First of all, in order to feed your family, money comes from God. It doesn't come from the River Nile. Let's be clear. Now, your next question is, so how am I going to get a profession? There's other ways. First of all, you can make money as a businessman, make much more money than a doctor. I don't know how much money doctors make in America today. It's not very much.
About making money.
So what is it?
It's about being a doctor, being a scientist.
There's other ways without going to poisoned college campuses. There's Jewish universities you can go to. You ever heard of Yeshiva University? You go to Jewish universities. Absolutely. And Brandeis, no, I don't think is someone says so true. My daughter went to Brandeis, a Jewish college, and was brainwashed. It's a disaster. Rob, you got to get comfortable with the mindset. You got to shift the needle for a second. And I think you're doing great, by the way. But you got to shift that needle and say, change the foundation, change the climate of the conversation and say, first of all, I don't worship idols. That's the first thing. Now we can have a conversation on the details. But you can't start off with the details. First, you got to change the music, and then you worry about the dance moves. You see what I'm saying? Let's change the music. That's where we're going. By the way, Jack, we have over here with us today is Steve, is right here sitting in the class, just letting you know. Anyways, folks, let's make it a great day. Over and out, folks.